Take a breath, hold it for just a second. Now let it go, and take another one. Here is something strange about those two breaths. You can easily picture where the first one came from, a forest, a meadow, a houseplant. But the second breath, that one came from an environment you've almost certainly never seen. Half of the oxygen keeping you alive right now is manufactured in the ocean by microscopic organisms called phytoplankton. These floating cells live near the sunlit surface of the water, soaking up carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen, quietly handling roughly half of all the photosynthesis happening on Earth. But here is the math that stops scientists in their tracks. Phytoplankton generate 50% of Earth's oxygen, yet they make up only around 1% of the planet's total plant life by weight. A tree is massive. It spends decades building a heavy trunk and branching canopy just to capture sunlight. It demands a vast amount of physical space. So, how does a fraction of a percent of marine biomass manage to match the respiratory output of every single forest, grassland, and jungle on land combined? The air filling your lungs right now is driven by an invisible engine that completely breaks our usual assumptions about physical size and biological power. The secret isn't mass, it's speed. A single phytoplankton cell is invisible to the human eye, but in a single day it splits in two. Then those two split again and again, running a continuous cycle of exponential division. Under the right conditions, this rapid replication creates populations so massive they form huge biological blooms. These are swirls of green and turquoise stretching across hundreds of square kilometers of open ocean, clearly visible from orbit. The smallest hero in this story is a microbe called Prochlorococcus. It is less than 1 micrometer across. You could line up 1,000 of them inside a single millimeter. Yet it is the most abundant photosynthesizing organism we know of. Researchers estimate this specific microbe produces up to 20% of the oxygen molecules we breathe. Yet for most of human history, we had no idea it existed. For decades, the instruments researchers used to sample seawater simply let Prochlorococcus slip straight through. The holes in the filter nets were just too large. It took until the late 1980s, using specialized lasers to detect the faint glow of their pigments, for scientists to finally catch them. Beyond the microbes, the ocean is packed with highly specialized plankton like diatoms. These single-celled algae actually build themselves transparent shells out of pure silica, the exact same material as glass. Under a microscope, they look like geometric jewel boxes, perfectly etched with patterns finer than any human factory could carve at that scale. These drifting cells represent an ancient, highly engineered workforce. They operate in plain sight, actively driving the chemistry of the entire planet. They are also the primary producers for the entire ocean. These invisible cells act as the very first link in the marine food chain, feeding the drifting zooplankton, which feed the small fish, all the way up to a creature the size of 3 school buses, the blue whale. Beyond feeding the sea, they perform a massive planetary chore called the biological carbon pump. As a phytoplankton cell builds its body, it pulls carbon dioxide out of the surface water, and by extension, the atmosphere. When that cell dies, its remains sink, physically dragging that carbon down into the cold, dark deep. Every single year, this invisible elevator locks away roughly 10 billion tons of carbon. It is a massive climate control system that has been running on schedule for billions of years. But this entire operation faces a strict biological bottleneck. Even though sunlight blankets the entire ocean surface, huge swaths of the water remain completely barren. The plankton have the light, but they lack essential deep-sea nutrients, like a trace of iron. We know this because scientists actually sailed out to these barren patches and deliberately sprinkled tiny amounts of dissolved iron directly into the water. Within days, starved and dormant phytoplankton exploded into a massive green bloom. They were just waiting for the right groceries to be delivered. In nature, nobody is sprinkling iron from a boat. Those nutrients are exclusively delivered to the sunlit surface through a physical process, the upward mixing of cold, deep ocean currents. The base of the ocean food web, and one of the largest carbon sinks on Earth. Both hang entirely on that one fragile mechanical motion, cold water rising to meet the sun. As the ocean's surface heats up, it forms a stable layer like warm oil on water, physically blocking deeper, colder water from mixing upward. Phytoplankton remain bathed in sunlight, but with nutrient arrows from below completely cut off, they slowly starve. In 2010, researchers at Dalhousie University analyzed over a century of ocean data and found a quiet alarm bell. Their models indicated that phytoplankton populations are declining by roughly 1% of the global average every single year. This is a chart mapping the estimated global phytoplankton population since 1950. A 1% annual decline might sound small, but compounded over a few human generations, it translates to a staggering 40% drop in the creatures making our air. Thinning this foundation destabilizes everything stacked above it. It threatens the fisheries that feed billions, starves marine animals, and risks breaking the carbon elevator that regulates our climate. We tend to think of the atmosphere as a permanent, passive backdrop to our lives, but it isn't. Breathable air is an active, manufactured product. That seemingly empty stretch of blue ocean is actually an ancient lung. It is actively keeping the planet alive, one invisible cell at a time. And our survival is intrinsically tied to making sure it never stops breathing.